The world is waking up, and you finding your way here today is no coincidence. The spirit world always has a way of guiding us where we most need to be at the absolute perfect time. I'm your host, Lindsay Morlock, and you're listening to the Guided Podcast, where we explore how the spirit world works on our behalf to guide us along our paths. This is where you'll learn how to live a life that is both conscious and connected, so you can supercharge your pathway to healing and open to life's magic and miracles. Come along this journey to see how guided you truly are. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Guided Podcast and this week's solo episode. I'm going to dive right in today and kick off this conversation with this message that I recently received from my spiritual support team. And the message was that no one trains for life in a relationship that ignores cultural conditioning. So let me say that again. No one trains for life in a relationship that ignores cultural conditioning. This message resonated so deeply for me because the relationship that they're speaking to is the relationship that you have with yourself. Because most of us, if we're truly honest with ourselves, we've been raised in a culture that tells us what success is and what it isn't. Many of us are taught to seek approval and validation of our choices outside of ourselves in an attempt to keep ourselves safe. And yet we do this at the expense of listening to what our heart and our soul are guiding us to actually do. So essentially, we ignore the relationship with ourselves on some level in search of these external measures of success, of validation, approval, support. The list continues, right? So why do we do this? Much of it stems back to childhood in that every single one of us was raised by caregivers who adhered to certain belief systems that are rooted somewhere in third dimensional paradigms. So any of your caregivers' belief systems, right? They all differ from one another. Some have an abundant mindset, while others might be steeped in scarcity programming. Some might strongly believe in a formulaic way of living, while others are more free-spirited. Just to give a few examples, right? There's so many belief systems that we can't possibly capture them all. But the point I'm trying to make is that whoever raised you, those attributes and beliefs, both positive and negative, basically makes up the whole of your internal operating system. And there is a lot happening subconsciously within that keeps us repeating patterns, many of which don't serve us. Many of them are dysfunctional. So I want to be clear. I'm not coming from a philosophy here of blaming or shaming any caregiver. I'm not. I truly believe that they all do the very best they can with what they have from where they are. And that's a very varied experience for people. And whether you had a wonderful childhood or you had a miserable childhood, both scenarios still cause wounding because it's all part of this divine blueprint that we're living. That said, your wounding is never your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal. Now, for me, part of my wounding I've recently learned was about feeling like any kind of unpredictability, any kind of uncertainty in my life meant that I wasn't safe. I come from a long line of control freaks, so naturally we want to control outcomes and predict the future in an attempt to make ourselves feel safe. And I remember when I was younger and I started babysitting, my mother gave me a piece of advice that actually served me really well as a babysitter. And the advice she gave me was, your job is to anticipate every move that kid makes in order to keep them safe. And you know what? I really took this advice to heart because I certainly didn't want any child under my care to get hurt. And I not only trained myself to do this as a babysitter, but also I translated it into every facet of my life. So I learned how to anticipate the moves every person in my life might make because I learned that it kept me feeling safe to feel a sense of certainty around how people were likely to act and how they were likely to behave. And of course, it wasn't foolproof, but I would anticipate a multitude of scenarios so that my mind felt prepared for anything that might be thrown my way. And in all of my careers, both in higher education and the corporate world, I literally built my career off of anticipating the moves and counter moves people were going to make. I would be basically playing a game of chess in my head with my coworkers, so I would be prepared for any situation and be able to influence outcomes outcomes in a more agreeable or harmonious way. And you know what? My methods worked. I was often positively reinforced for my ability to do this, especially in roles that were heavily operational, because that's a great skill in those types of roles, right? Trying to anticipate and solve for a problem before it even occurs, that's valuable. So in many regards, it was a skill that served me well, but it was also a skill that left me feeling like I needed to control everything in my life. And when we need to control everything, we also cut ourselves off from life's magic and being able to really create those miracles. But this is how I learned how to be in relationship with others. And it's especially how I learned to be in relationship with myself as a self-protection mechanism, to overthink my circumstances and then control them, to plan way far in advance and stick to the plan without any room for spontaneity, to set goals 5 and 10 years in advance and then take concrete action steps to hit milestones and achieve those goals. And honestly, I hit every milestone that I set out to achieve. And again, in my mind, this behavior wasn't a problem. It was effective because I created the perception that as long as I worked hard enough or pushed through, that whatever I wanted or needed to create, I was able to create by employing those methods. And by society's definition of success, I was highly successful. I have an advanced degree from a well-known university. I've been promoted quickly and frequently in every single job I've ever had. In my last job, my corporate job, I held the title of Chief Operating Officer, and I had the option to explore becoming president, but I knew I didn't want it at the time. But I tell you this because arguably, I could have been in nearly the highest position at the company. And I did that without having any experience in the actual industry that the company I worked for held expertise in. And I got there because I was a fast learner, I was an extremely hard worker, and I was incredibly people smart. I was a people pleaser, I was a perfectionist, and I anticipated moves and counter moves. And the other factor was I was highly agreeable. I rarely, if ever, put up a fight. I was a yes and kind of person, always saying yes, often at the expense of my own well-being, to not only make others look good in their roles, but also to ensure that I would be indispensable. And it worked. These things got me a lot of appreciation, applause, approval, accolades in every position I held. So naturally, in my mind, all of those things were what was creating my success, or at least greatly contributing to it. And yet within me, I was living a life of quiet desperation. I knew that I was the picture of success, arguably from the outside looking in. I held the degree, the COO title, I had a nice salary, I owned my own home, I had no debt to my name. I got praised for these things, like I had done something right with my life to be at this particular juncture. But you know what? None of these things actually brought me happiness. But the truth is that I thought they were the only things bringing me happiness. At the time, I would have told you that I didn't care about my title. And in certain ways, I wasn't someone who was driven by title, but I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I loved what people automatically assumed about me by the sheer fact that I held that title. I loved my home because it was my sanctuary, yes, but I have to tell you, when I sold that home and didn't have that mortgage each month, I felt this new level of financial freedom that I didn't even know I felt trapped by. I loved that my salary offered me a sense of safety and security for both my present and my future, but I was working hard for money that I then used to buy things or do things to help distract myself from my actual life. So while people around me looked at all that I had achieved and made it mean something big, on the inside, I was dreaming about a totally different life, not the one I was actually living. So I need to acknowledge that I made all these things mean something big. I made them mean that I was worthy. I made it mean that I was valuable. And until I gave all of it up, until all of these things were stripped from my life, and I was really forced to look at what my heart truly values, well, I didn't realize how much of a sense of self-worth these things were actually fueling. But what is also true is that I was dealing with drama in my my life constantly. Drama from people at the workplace. I've actually never worked any place where there isn't a certain level of drama, and that created unnecessary stress in my life. My job required me to constantly be putting out fires, which also caused me to be in a constant state of reactivity, which also caused stress. My health suffered. I gained significant amounts of weight. For those of you who know me, you know I had a 100-pound weight loss journey, but stress and unprocessed emotions caused me to re-engage in my binge eating behaviors, causing me to gain at least 60 of those pounds back. I had 2 spinal fusion surgeries, my gallbladder removed, and a slew of other digestive issues, food sensitivities, you name it. I had some friendships at the time that often left me feeling like I got the short end of the stick because they lacked reciprocity, and that never left me feeling fulfilled or really valued in the relationship. So while I had a title and a good salary and money to go on vacation once in a while, I was kind of miserable on the inside. I had no passions, no less energy to try to figure out what I might even be interested in. I was gaining a lot of weight. My self-esteem was plummeting, and I was feeling hopeless about being able to change my circumstances because my life wasn't actually that bad. I just wasn't happy. And at one particularly low point, I couldn't get out of bed in the morning because I was so tired. I was in chronic pain, and I was only 35 years old at the time. I would sit in my condo around this time, and I would look at my fireplace and think to myself, sitting there, wow, as much as I love this home, if I'm still sitting here doing the same exact thing 10 years from now, I don't even know what I'm going to be thinking of myself or doing with myself. So living this predictable life felt so safe and comfortable. And yet my soul was yearning for something more, yearning for something different, something that felt better. And yet I honestly couldn't even really dream what that could be or how to make that happen. I would fantasize about quitting my corporate job, moving to Sedona, but I also felt like being a single woman with no backup income source, felt like it would be irresponsible to leave my job and salary to work for myself without having either massive amounts of money saved in advance or some more solid backup plan financially. So instead of trying to figure those things out, I just resigned myself to my mundane reality and focused more on dreaming about some destination I could actually bring to life. So maybe going to safari or maybe going to Bali. Those dreams felt like a stretch, but doable. Or some other smaller, more manageable dream because I really didn't feel like I had any big dreams. And I was feeling so powerless to change my circumstances. I instead just tried to will myself to just be happy with the life I had and abdicated any sort of power I had to change my circumstances. You know, I'd look on LinkedIn for new jobs, thinking that maybe I just needed a new challenge or a change of pace. But every job description I looked at made my stomach flip. I was so uninterested in doing a different version of the same job and a different version of the same life. And I want to say there's nothing wrong with living the life that I had. It was a good life. It just didn't feel good to me. And the depth of despair and emptiness I constantly felt left my soul yearning for something different. So that's why I decided to take this leap into the unknown. And let me tell you, I didn't have logical reasons to do what I did. I wasn't independently wealthy. My spiritual business, when I left my corporate job, was not in a place of fully sustaining me financially when I ended up leaving. And one day when my niece asked me why I was moving across the country as opposed to staying where I was, which was within minutes of family and friends, the only reason I could really offer her was that I was being guided to do this. In fact, I did actually make a list of pros and cons. And from a logical standpoint, I will tell you the list of cons was actually longer than the list of pros. And my body was still telling me that doing this was a yes. So for me, I knew that it was about leaving this old way of living, this old way of being in order to be able to start living a more authentic life, one that felt good to me. But the decisions I made weren't logical. They were guided. They were intuitive. And without that guidance along the way, without spirit helping me to heal, to be ready to make these big leaps without totally freaking out, I'm certain without that, I would still be on my couch, looking at my fireplace, contemplating those same thoughts about what am I going to do if I'm still sitting here in 10 years. So fast forward to my life today. I'm 2 years into this journey of living a more authentic life. And here's what I can say. I now have a life that I don't need a vacation from, and yet I still get to go on vacation. While it took me some time to meet people, I'm finally finding interesting people in my new town that are offering me different collaborations and partnerships that are fueling my business. They're fueling my passions and starting to open up a social life in more positive and fun ways. I used to spend loads of time in my old life aimlessly walking around stores like Home Goods and TJ Maxx, not to mention other little boutiques or shops, simply to give myself something to do. It was also a way I used to distract myself from my life and from what was going on with it. And don't get me wrong, I still enjoy doing these things from time to time. But now when I do it with purpose, not because I'm trying to escape other realities in my life like I used to. I no longer own my own home. I rent a room from a friend of mine. And I know that this was completely divine because I don't know that I would have been able to endure some of the more challenging parts of this journey without her support in various ways. And I really believe that Spirit knew this and set me up for success, especially since the last time I made a big move like this, I threw in the towel after 18 months. Now, I was much younger. It was the first time that I had done anything like that. And I was not in a great place emotionally. And I didn't have the support or resources I needed to make it work. And so, all of these things are perfect, but I truly wanted to do this move differently. So I'm self-employed. I have no predictable income every single month. And yet all my needs are met. I work a fraction of the time that I used to work. I work to live. I don't live to work anymore. My work feels more like a devotion than a job. I truly get to work with clients I love. I get to talk about spirit all day, which I love. And I get to create artistic projects that are opening me up to passions I didn't actually even know I had. So that's all been so fun and enjoyable. And I am also experiencing the greatest health I've ever experienced. My blood work has never looked better. I've lost weight naturally. I'm free from so much of the chronic pain that I used to have on the daily in my old life. I went from never owning an animal in my entire life to living with 2 horses, 4 dogs, usually some additional foster pups at any given time, and a bird. And I never used to think that I even liked animals. And now their care is front and center in my life. And they have brought me so many gifts. Even my own dog has served as a huge mirror for me and my healing and such a catalyst for me to move along my own journey. And I'll go into this more in another episode, but I, never even realized I had a passion for gardening or passion for painting, but I've been able to explore these things and realize how much they're fueling my energy and supporting my energy for my purpose. And so, one day I was explaining this to a friend of mine and she said, "Wow, I really admire you because you've made so many sacrifices in pursuit of your dream." And it was a really interesting reflection that helped me to realize that I look at my life from the perspective of everything that I had to give up or everything that I perceived to have lost. When I look at my circumstances through that lens of I gave up my home, I gave up my salary, I gave up my title, I gave up my 401k, I gave up my health insurance, I gave up living near friends and family. If I look at it through that lens, I'd be lying if I didn't feel like I sacrificed to follow my dream. And I feel like I grieved over these things and this transition, which is someone that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, that grief, but it happened. I went through it. But it's an important part of the process because the grief is just signifying the ending. And where there are endings, there are always new beginnings. But loss or perceived loss is one of the more painful experiences, I would say, that we have as human beings. But the truth is that in the beginning of this journey, what I've come to learn is that what I was actually grieving was less about letting go of these things, although that did need to be grieved. But the bigger grief was having to let go of my attachment to my old identity, the one in which people from the outside looking in would generally pass positive judgment on in the form of, wow, you're in your 30s and you're a COO and you own your own home, etc. Like you've got it together was the gist of their judgment in a positive way. Those were the assumptions generally projected onto me. And I was actually grieving the loss of living living my life according to society's definition of success. And it's interesting that we can grieve so deeply for something that we didn't even want. I had that life and I chose to let go of it in pursuit of real and lasting happiness. And yet I had to grieve the loss of that person and the worthiness she was getting from the external sources of approval and validation of a life well achieved. So a large aspect of this journey for me required stripping away the things that I thought I valued, like money, like killing myself working for others, owning my own home, making sure I had a huge savings account. I had to look at why I was assigning so much value to these things. What were these things actually creating within me that made me feel so important or that made me feel so responsible? And as a result of this, I was required to redefine success for myself. So as I made this transition, I was no longer making the same money I made in my corporate job. So my finances worked differently. And I had to come face to face with the fact that I valued money so much because having more than I needed offered me a sense of safety and security that I highly valued. So coming to head with this led me to understand that my safety actually lies within me, not within some outside job or salary that actually could be taken away by somebody else, right? I had to look at the fact that my worthiness as a human being doesn't change simply because I don't work a corporate job. Now, I should say I got a lot of worth from that job because I was a go-to person. People needed me to fix things or address things constantly, and it gave me this feeling of being invaluable, right? Having a COO title at a young age is a bit glamorous to people on the outside looking in, I think, but I'd recognize how someone would introduce me and how their expression would change as if they were impressed. And as much as I think I didn't want to believe that I didn't care about the title, I certainly cared about the nod of approval. But when you remove the element of your life that offers you the most sense of self-worth, for me, it was my job, I suddenly had to acknowledge how low my actual self-esteem really was, or not only low, but unhealthy, and start to dig into issues around my own worthiness and how to claim a real healthy sense of it. And while I know with every ounce of my being that selling my home was the right decision, I put my house on the market, and within 1 week, I had 5 offers, 1 cash offer over asking price, no contingencies, right? There's absolutely no question that the universe was telling me that this was without a doubt the right decision, but I questioned myself for selling it, right? The reason I questioned it is because while renting a room from my friend, it would have looked much better in my mind to also have owned a home, perhaps one that I just rented out, not only for that income stream, but more honestly, so I could still tell people that I owned a home as opposed to what I feared they would think about renting a room, which was, does that look like a step back? And I'm sharing all of these thoughts and beliefs and circumstances because now that I've moved through to the other side of them, because I can see much more clearly now how I approached this entire transition from a place of woundedness, instead of focusing on all the things I did have, instead of focusing on how supported I was in every single phase of this journey, instead of focusing on all of the ways my life continued to get better and better and better, my mind wanted me focused only on the things that I perceived to have lost, which ironically were the same things I intentionally made a decision to leave behind because they weren't making me happy. I mean, it's crazy, right? So I was far more concerned about what others were thinking about my journey and how I moved through it than giving myself a high five for making a bold move, or instead of, staying safe and stuck in the life I so desperately wanted out of and trusting in a future that I couldn't actually see evidence of yet. I understand that person, that one who is too afraid of stepping into the unknown because as much as the known sucks, it's still more certain than the unknown. And I intimately know that person. That's the person I was. And I had to decide to leave that behind. And I also know that without the support of my own spirit team and some amazing mentors, I would still be that person stuck in the same place. But now that I'm through the self-imposed struggle of that transition, I can see the beauty and the gifts of this experience. And it's still playing out. It's still unfolding. But I learned that my perspective about my circumstances was off. I was so afraid of the unknown. I was so afraid of uncertainty that I didn't allow myself to enjoy the journey or the experience of making these changes, despite the fact that I have been beautifully supported in so many ways throughout this entire ride. While my mind wanted to panic about everything, especially financially related, the truth is that I haven't adjusted my spending habits during this transition at all. Actually, I adopted a dog, so I arguably added expenses, and I still take vacations, and I still buy what I need when I need it. The truth is that all my needs are met every single day. So all that worrying did was rob me of my peace and enjoyment of the process and what I was, learning. And when I was trying to manifest my new home, before I sold my old one, ironically, I would dream about having a neighborhood to walk around in. I dreamed of having garden beds that I could plant in. I dreamed of being able to exercise more. And all of these things came true. It just happened to come true living with my friend. So a lot of times these things don't unfold the way our minds would have scripted them. And they unfold oftentimes even better than our minds could have planned. But when our reality doesn't match these fantasies that we create in our minds, we end up feeling like we failed, or we end up feeling disappointed. I have a beautiful living situation that I would never have if I were in some sort of apartment community, not to mention the beauty that comes from being able to live with someone where reciprocity exists and we genuinely want to help and support each other. It makes life easier for both of us, right? It makes life better. And it's a beautiful example of what abundant relationships look like. It's a blessing for both of us at this particular time. And I wasn't where I thought I should be in my life. I'm now in my 40s. I held strong beliefs that my business needed to look a certain way, that, I should bring in a certain level of revenue, that I needed to own my own home, that I needed to work much harder on a daily basis than I do in order to make money. Well, all of those thoughts and beliefs are a real setup for not feeling good about your life, even though they're very logical. And so I was constantly putting pressure on myself to get my business to a certain level. And I held delusions of being an overnight success like you see on Instagram. But the truth is that the only thing these delusions were doing was leaving me feeling like a failure. And we will always find reasons to feel like a failure when we're comparing ourselves to others. We're always going to find reasons as to why this person is doing better or that person has it all figured out. We're not here to mimic other people's paths. We're here to carve out our own. So my mind noodled on all of these things. It created all of these stories, all of which caused me suffering, none of which offered any kind of truth. I wasn't unworthy because I no longer held a COO title. I wasn't downgrading my life because I was opting for a different kind of living arrangement. I wasn't being financially irresponsible because I left my corporate salary before I was bringing in the same level of income in my personal business. But these were all stories I wrestled with within myself, and I needed to confront all of the things my mind thought it valued in order to be able to throw out the old paradigms that weren't serving me and no longer a reflection of the person I was actually becoming. Part of what this journey taught me is that my healing work was about allowing myself to learn how to feel safe living a life that reflects who I truly am, how to feel safe living a life that makes me feel good instead of one that makes me look good, a life that makes me feel proud because it's aligned with who I truly am, not because it's aligned with what society wants me to be or thinks I should be. So part of what this journey taught me is that I really needed to redefine success for myself, because the paradigms of success, the ones that told me to look outside of myself to determine whether or not I was successful, they made me miserable. That's the truth. I was miserable. For example, success for me in that old paradigm was a reflection of how much money I had in the bank, how little debt I had, the fact that I held a COO title at a fairly young age, relatively speaking, and that I was single and able to buy my first home all on my own. Those were all important to me, and I didn't even realize it. So much so that if you asked me at the time if I thought those things were important, I would have told you no. I might have told you that they were things that I was proud to have accomplished, but when you break down why they made me feel proud, it was because they fueled my self-esteem in a positive way. It's because these things actually meant something to other people from the outside looking looking in. They were a nonverbal reflection of society's definition of success. So I didn't have to tout that I was successful because people could just hear my title or some of these facts and they would just make the assumption that I was. And that is what bolstered my self-worth. And we all do this with things in our life. We look to external measures to create some feeling within us that we want or need to feel, oftentimes because there's a wound there that's calling to be healed. So I really encourage you to think about how you define success for yourself. If you find yourself needing a certain salary or needing to own a certain home or car or whatever the thing might be, dive into it and ask yourself, why or what is that thing or that need doing for you? How is it serving you? If it's purely because it brings you a feeling of joy, okay, awesome, right? If there's nothing else attached to it, go for it. But if it's because the car offers a symbol of status, question where you are wanting or needing the approval of others, maybe, or where you might be trying to fit in, trying to belong, right? That's just one small example. Certainly not applicable to everyone, but it is an example of how it might play out for someone. For me, most of the things I valued were not only giving me a sense of worthiness, but it was also fodder for my people-pleasing ways. But the truth is that in the process of doing things to be successful, I ended up doing things so others could really see me as successful. But are you really successful if you're miserable? Like, where does being happy, I mean, truly, undeniably, sustainably happy, fall into your definition of success? I know in the past, this wasn't even a factor for consideration in my own definition of success. And to this day, right, one of the first questions people ask me when I talk to them is, how's business? And the old me would judge myself for not bringing in a certain level of revenue I thought I should be bringing in, or, I would judge myself for feeling like, well, I could have more clients at this time or that time. It was just that question created nothing but judgment within me. But the new me, the me that is stepping into this new way of being and this more authentic life would give you this answer. My business is amazing because it doesn't feel like a job. I get to do what I love every single day. And if I'm tired, I get to rest instead of pushing myself beyond my limits or grinding too hard. And I don't have to ask anyone permission for time off. I have at least 3 creative projects in the works that will take me over a year to complete. And I can honestly say I am loving every aspect of that creation process. I'm enjoying the journey of creating. So the result is going to be awesome, but it might even pale in comparison to how much fun I'm having with the creation process itself. I'm finding so much more enjoyment and fulfillment in every single moment of each day. I wake up earlier than I have ever woken up before. And while that is partially because of my dog, full disclosure, it is mostly because I no longer need to hit the snooze button to escape from my life. And my business is a reflection of me and who I am and who I continue to become. So the best thing I do for my business is I take care of my alignment. I give myself the best part of my day. I wake up, I go for a walk with my dog while drinking my coffee. I pull cards, I connect with spirit. I might meditate or do breath work. I get to work in my garden and take care of horses and animals, and I get to connect with like-minded spiritual people. And then I start my day with my business, and I get to choose to work on projects that only bring me joy. And when I'm talking to my clients, it's amazing because I love every single person that I work with. There's no bad business in my world. There's no drama in my life anymore. And I have time for me and time to explore new creative passions. And I get to do things that actually help me to feel good in my body. They help stimulate my mind in the right ways, and they allow me to make how I feel each and every day and my healing the priority in my life. And in all of that, spirit totally has my back. So I don't think that's the answer that most people expect when they ask me, how's business? They expect me to say, right, I'm busy, I'm working hard to build my dream, my schedule's overflowing with clients, maybe even that I'm struggling. Don't get me wrong. I am not Susie Sunshine 24/7. In fact, as honest as I'm being, there are only a handful of people who truly even witnessed what I went through to arrive at what I'm able to confidently share with you today, because I was in so much resistance early on. It is not easy all the time to make these kinds of shifts, especially when that 3D programming runs deep. I'm still human. I still go through things just like anyone else. Being spiritual doesn't exempt us from life's challenges. But the difference for me is that I know how to hold myself through my emotions, and I take the necessary steps to get myself back into alignment, to understand the emotions I'm feeling, what lesson spirit is trying to teach me through that. And I take the steps I'm being guided to take in order to heal my life and to see through illusion to get to the truth of whatever situation I'm embroiled in. And that work is not always easy because it's very confronting, but it's always worth it because I can see how my life continues to get better and better and better. And that betterment has absolutely nothing to do with what society says will improve my life. When it comes to my business, the truth is that I am my business. And the best thing I can do for my business is to take care of me. So my definition of success has had to alter tremendously to accommodate that. I now look at my success by reflecting on whether or not I'm enjoying how I'm spending my time each day, whether or not I feel good in my body, whether I took enough time to focus on actions that help build and support my dreams. How balanced am I in the process of creating all of these things? Am I happy about what's showing up in my life? Am I standing my ground with my boundaries with myself and with others? Am I taking responsibility for the steps that spirit is guiding me to take each and every day with my healing? Am I excited about what I'm working on and what I'm creating? And really important is how much love, compassion, and patience am I showing myself along the journey? And it's important for me to acknowledge that the reason this shift was such a struggle for me in terms of arriving at where I currently am with this current perspective is because I put myself through so much needless suffering that honestly was because I was in so much resistance to moving into this new way of being in the world because I wanted to stay in control of creating outcomes as opposed to letting go of these outmoded paradigms to make way for the new ones to come into my life. So some of those things and those beliefs and things that needed to be shifted, just to give you a few examples, right? Spirit told me that I could make money easily, but it required me letting go of a belief that I held that you have to work hard to make money. So many people have this belief, right? Hard work equates to money. That was a seemingly benign belief that I was raised with. Hard work equals money. But as long as you believe that, you need to work hard in order to make money. And if you don't perceive yourself to be working hard, you won't see the money. You can make money easily. Plenty of people are doing it. So that was a belief. Like, why hang on to that? Get rid of it. Spirit told me that productivity is a way that success is measured in a very 3D sense, right? How productive was I today? And I admit I'm somebody who loves that feeling of being productive. Being productive makes me feel successful. I also tied being productive to my worthiness. So I had to unpack that and detach from the belief that I had to constantly be doing in order to be successful. It was very uncomfortable to allow myself to relax into being more and stop myself from feeling like I needed to do more. In fact, this is something I'm still working on because being is still uncomfortable for me, but I can now see how it is the pathway. So it's much easier for me now to have that willingness to relax into it when my mind wants to fall back into old patterns. I was so committed to society's definition of success that I refused to see that my own definition was misguided, especially since my actual life now just keeps getting better and better and better. And I've already articulated to you so many of the ways that it's gotten better. But to add to that list, right, I now live in a place that has sunshine nearly every day. I have an amazing roommate and living situation. My dog Hopi has brought so much love into my life. I'm now connected with friends who are like-minded and incredibly supportive of me and my path. I've learned how to trust myself more deeply. I've learned how to truly have compassion for myself and what I might be going through. I'm exploring and embracing all sorts of new passions, and more are starting to come into my awareness. I'm far more peaceful and emotionally stable than ever before. I'm confident in my ability to hold myself through whatever life throws my way and my ability to get to the truth and the understanding that I need to move through it. I'm excited excited about being able to build a business that only requires me to focus on how I feel while I'm creating all the things for it and to take inspired action. I'm far more present. I'm far more accepting of my power and my ability to change any circumstance that is less than desirable, as opposed to where I used to be, which was getting stuck in the victimhood. And I'm experiencing the greatest health I've ever had in my life. My boundaries with myself, with others continue to grow stronger, and that creates much healthier relationships for me. I'm being more visible. I'm putting more of my authentic self out into the world with a level of vulnerability that honestly is so comfortable now. It just feels like authenticity. And in the past, I wouldn't have felt safe to offer that. I'm far more willing to speak my truth to others. I'm learning to get comfortable with uncertainty. And most importantly, I'm really learning how to find joy in the actual journey, as opposed to being so focused on results and outcomes. And I could go on, but these are just some of the big things. And when I reflect on this list, these aren't little things. These are things that required deep levels of healing and learning and unpacking and rewinding and unwinding. And I know my work is not done with any of this, but where I am has allowed me to move into this space of starting to open up to what I know will continue to become a more and more authentic life. These are the things that truly liberate us. These are the things that give us freedom. To me, this is what success is about. It's about becoming more and more who we truly are and allowing that you to shine bright. There were days on this part of my journey that I really needed to push myself to see the bright side. And there were days that I was bouncing off the walls and pinching myself because I couldn't believe that this is the life I get to live. And that to me is part of living a guided life, right? Our healing can be confronting, but it doesn't have to be difficult. And when we have tools to know how to navigate these challenging times, we allow ourselves to move through these things so much faster and with much more grace and much more ease. I know that in my life, I will never regret making my own healing a priority, partially because, as I like to tell Spirit, I am not coming back here and doing this all over again. Full disclosure, I'll do different stuff, but I don't want to have to repeat these lessons if I can heal them now. But I will also never regret it because every single level of healing tears away a layer of self-protection that closes my heart, that my ego uses to keep me safe and keep me stuck. And when we close our heart to protect ourselves from the bad stuff, you better believe we are also keeping ourselves from the good and juicy stuff too. I know that all of the skin that is shedding is really allowing more of the real me to shine through. And I've never been interested in living a mundane life. And Spirit guides us to live extraordinary ones. And to do that, we have to be willing to surrender the cultural conditioning and programming in exchange for boundless ways of being. And all of that is done between you and you. This is why the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. I know I'm going to continue to redefine success for myself as I navigate this journey, as I continue to shed my own layers of limitation and continue to learn how to open my heart to my most expansive and authentic self. And the reflection I'd like to leave you with is it's amazing to me how my perspective of success in my former life was pretty sparkly to society, and yet I was completely miserable on the inside. Somehow I managed to tolerate my unhappiness in exchange for society's approval. And those internal measures of success and approval were far more important than what I truly believe success to be, which is, are you living your most authentic life? Are you living unapologetically? Are you living a life on your own terms, regardless of reaction or rejection from others along the way? This was certainly a confronting part of the process for me, but I can truly feel the expansion and the excitement of a whole new life that is now unfolding, where happiness and authentic success is actually my reality. And I have my spiritual support team and some pretty enlightened, badass women in 3D who have helped me arrive here. So I am super grateful to to all of those beings who helped me arrive. So that, my friends, is my wish for you. May you love and honor yourself enough to know that you are worthy of creating a life that just lights you up. And so I will leave you with that until next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Guided Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be so grateful if you would share it with a friend or even leave me a review so we can ensure that it makes its way into the ears of listeners who need to hear these messages most. Until next time, may you remember how guided you truly are.